Welcome to Shadows from the Tree. This week we're going to dive into the darker side of genealogy by exploring stories pulled from newspaper archives and using historical records to find the truth behind them. Specifically focusing on the theme of sickness and the impact it had on the lives of those involved. So I'm Danielle, and here I got my cousin Michelle, and we are excited to give this episode to you this week. We're doing a little bit of change as well. You know, as moms, we have a really hard time finding a perfect spot and time to record.
Yep.
So it's always like, who's going to have the quieter house, or or when is that going to, when are the kids out?
Yeah.
And, last time we recorded it, we did it at like 8 or 9 at night because it was the only time. And I'm like, we got to try the morning because I'm much more lively and my brain works way better in the morning.
Same. Yeah.
So
end of the day, end of the week, it was a rough one.
Yes. So thanks for those who tuned in and are continuing to listen as we, also are training ourselves on how to do this podcast. So, it's been a good journey so far, and we'll continue to keep going. So, thinking about sickness, my story kind of took hold of a family of 10. And when I started researching into this one, I kind of was thinking about how currently, like, my family tree has been affected by sickness. So for me specifically, I grew up without like a paternal grandfather because of cancer. So that's how something kind of shaped my tree to the more current times. And then I also was thinking about like COVID, right? So think about the generations to come. They're going to be looking back at our family trees or those who unfortunately lost a loved one during the pandemic. And that's truly going to be a lot of articles about that. My daughter was born the first week of the shutdown, and so her grandfather got her a newspaper article for every birthday.
Yeah.
And the first one for her first year birthday, or the date of her birth, was first COVID case, So it shall be interesting. But do you feel like you have any experience in your family with, like, in your current family of how sickness affected, or have your family been pretty healthy?
Mostly cancer.
Cancer too?
Yeah. My family, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's definitely something you can't avoid, and it definitely alters people's lives and the way they continue their future. So, so, all right, so my article, let's get the date here. So, it was from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and it took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was written on Wednesday, January 1st, 1913. It was across 2 pages, so it was on sort of the front line header, and then also you had to go down to another page to find the rest of the story. But it was called Death, Sickness, Poverty Prey on This Household, with a smaller headline of Baby Dead, Wife Ill, 7 Children Starving, The Burden.
Yikes.
With another smaller headline, Husband Unemployed and is unable to defray child's funeral expenses.
They needed GoFundMe.
I know, seriously. I know, they needed a GoFundMe of today's time. So when we decided that, hey, let's try to find an episode on this topic, it was the first one I actually came across, and I read it, and I was like, ooh, I need to share this family's story.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what happened to the rest of the family. Mm-hmm. So I just decided to go with it.
It's intriguing.
It was intriguing, yeah. So when I started, I'll give you some more details about the story after, but I started to go on Ancestry and Family Search and find more information. But the thing I was running up against was the surnames, which in genealogy, they use surnames typically over last name or family name.
Right.
But I found several spellings of the last name.
Yeah.
So
that can make it way trickier.
Yes, yeah. And I'm still like getting used to Ancestry. Like, they do have a really good tool where you can like tick where it sounds like sounds familiar, sounds like a name. But
the closeness bar.
Yes, you can move the closest bar to see. Or, if you're confident about the first name, you can check that. But I found a lot of different spellings. So the family's name is Zaleski, and they came from Poland. Mm-hmm. And let me and I have lots of notes so my brain can remember everything. But so I found several. So a couple examples were Suleski, Suleski, Sulecki,
Oh,
Stolecki, and Szylucki. So those were just a handful, but there were way more differences. And I think an important part of this story being in 1913 and be an immigrant family, one of the censuses I did find did say like he couldn't read or write in English.
right.
So you think about all the immigrants that came over, there's a lot of miscommunication happening. Even the people who are walking around doing the censuses, I'm sure,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
When they were transposing on like Ellis Island, I've read that they didn't get a lot of names correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I
People
think,
even changed their names.
right,
Too.
that's so true. And even in our more recent family, I have or my husband's side of the family, when they came and immigrated, like they totally butchered their names and lost part of their whole first name. And, so it's definitely interesting. But, and being in 1913, my first kind of reaction was to go and look at the 1910 census.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time. I could not find anything. And being a family of 10, I thought, wow, I should find something quickly because I have a lot of information from the one article.
Yeah.
The article gave me all the names of the first names of the children, their age,
Yep.
the year Thomas, the father, immigrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, it even gave their address. So I was like, okay, I'm finding something.
Yeah.
And I did not. So the 1910 census is really, I might have to go back to it because it's bothering me that I can't find it. But
sometimes they go, instead of like the U.S. census, it's by state. I found if you
by
look
state?
at like the
Okay.
state government office, sometimes they have more details. I had to do that for a couple. Like Massachusetts specifically, for some reason they weren't in the U.S. one. But
so strange.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to definitely have to do that. But, and then another thought was maybe they didn't live at that address 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And but I should have found them somewhere.
Yeah.
In the census in 1910. But good point. I'll have to circle back. So getting into my story a little bit, I told you we got some information there. So I'll give you a couple names of the family members. And if you have a Szylucki in your family tree, I would encourage you to kind of dig in, and this could be a story about your family. And I'm always super curious about, had you been told this story through generations, or is it new information to you? Your reaction being a close family member, how did it make you feel? Those are the things I really find interesting. So we have Thomas, he's the dad. And the only bummer about this story was they didn't give the wife's name specifically. They just said the wife. But the children were John, who was 17, Stella, 14, Clara, 12, Frank, 11, Nellie, 7, Anna, 5, Mary, 3, and then Thomas Jr., who was 6 days old.
Oof.
So that's a lot of babies.
Yeah.
I encourage every woman back in that generation who's had multiple children, because I could not do it, but it's a lot. But it creates a big family, which I'm sure was lots of fun. So those are our, I guess you say, characters in our story, or people that we'll be speaking about. But the whole part of this story was all about the youngest child, Thomas Jr., who was 6 days old. And he had unfortunately died of tuberculosis. And the whole meaning behind the story was that the dad had such hardships recently that he did not even have enough money to bury his own child. And it talked about the wife had been sick over a year, and he had to actually stop his job to take care of the family. But even when he was working, it specifically said that he had been paid $7 a week, but their rent was $7 a month, plus you're having to feed all these children and take care of them. So it was actually pretty sad, where the guy, whoever was interviewing him for the story, had even written that between sobs and in broken English, he was telling his story. And even Clara, who was 12, had to help tell the story because he couldn't carry on. And so this all happened right around New Year's. So that the first line in the story is New Year's holds no happiness for this family, unfortunately. So they go ahead. I being about Thomas, I found his death certificate. So that's always super helpful. It did confirm the address. Yep. There was a discrepancy in the story. The story said he was 6 months old, but the death certificate was 6 days old. And I'm saying my death certificate is accurate given the name of the parent on there and the address, but they didn't list the mother, which I just thought it said mother unknown, which was kind of odd because she was in the household. Yeah. So anyway, so I got that information, which was good. It even was saying how the people who were part of the cemetery heard his story and actually gave him a burial. So that was really, that's kind. Yeah, so that was nice, and I think that made him feel probably a lot better. And there was a lot of talk about this family back then because even the teacher had noticed that 2 of the kids who were going to school had barely no clothes on them. They had a really small house. They said pretty much everything was just in one room, and there was that many people in it. And even neighbors were trying to give them food, and it had said that they were trying to give him food to help feed the kids, but only recently, up a month ago, before this all happened, he was too, I don't want to say stubborn, but prideful in accepting the help. But then after, a month got really hard and they were helping him feed all the kids. There was also the old GoFundMe of the day, and people were sending in money. There was even, where did I write that down? There was one anonymous sympathizer, it said, who gave $5, which was an equivalent to, I can't find it in my notes, it was $150 or something like that. So that would have really helped them. Definitely. A little girl who was 8 years old heard the story and wanted to give money. Mm-hmm. So there was an article about that. So before I go further back into the story, I was looking up the Franklin Cemetery, which is where Thomas was buried, Thomas Jr. And it was a free burial, so I guess there were probably many people in that cemetery who were buried for free. But I found an interesting article in 1947. It was called "Old Cemetery Will Be New Playground." And so...
Okay.
Yeah, so in 1947... they supposedly transferred 8,000 bodies, which were supposedly part of 240 grave sites, to another cemetery, and it's now an elementary school.
The site of
where the buried bodies used to be.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I found that, I was like, oh, okay.
Wonder if that's haunted.
Yes. I mean, the good thing, I don't know the exact dates, but 1947, I'm wondering when the dad had passed away. I can't imagine being the family member and maybe getting the news that they need to be transferred or...
were they still alive when that
Let me
happened?
see. I'm going to pull up my tree quick and just get the dates that they had. Most of them... I think they would have... No, there was one in 1943, so that was a child. So I think they would have mostly been passed by that time they had to transfer them, which is, I guess, kind of... more helpful in a sense for the emotional connection part of it. Right. But then to make it even worse with the Franklin Cemetery, there was another article posted in 1988, and it was a tale of 47,000 bodies, final resting place unknown. So it was a whole thing about owners of the cemeteries, and it was resold or something, and they were they went to police saying that they didn't think all the bodies from that Franklin Cemetery had been transferred there and thought they were other places. So
record keeping was not so good. Not
so good, and it's just oh gosh, who knows. So that was just an interesting thing about the Franklin Cemetery. But so then I move on to the mom, who I did find a death certificate for, who's named Mary Ann, and come to find out, I was hopeful that she had made it with her tuberculosis. And unfortunately, she had it for 28 days. It was listed, her sickness, and she died in January, the end of January. So
that was long suffering.
Yeah, long suffering. And then not only did she lose her child, and in the article they talk about how the mother was just so sickly and so emotionally gone from losing her child. So
she just gave birth. And
exactly. So there's the things that come after giving birth. Yes. So it's a lot. So she was buried in a different cemetery. And I actually, some family members, it seemed, on Ancestry had done a lot of research. And I found some pictures. And if this information is accurate, there's a picture of Thomas standing at her cemetery gravestone. So I will, let's actually see if I have it just to show you quickly. But supposedly that's Thomas. I'm not sure who that is. And that's Mary's grave site. But my question when I looked at this was, he looked pretty well dressed. So that was my only question, like being in Parvati only 28 days after.
Might be like their funeral clothes, you know.
Yeah, it's true, and they might have had
something.
Yeah, that's true. Nice. So, and then there was a picture of what is to be believed as Thomas and Mary.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what year that was supposedly dated, but so that was interesting.
Great find, though.
Yeah, great find. Yeah, someone definitely did a lot of research in that family, which is always nice to have. And our hopes for our own families is they get our information that we found about our family trees. But so that was Mary, tuberculosis of the lung. So then I was just curious about tuberculosis and did a little bit of research. And I was saying at the early 19th century, like every 1 of 7 were dying of tuberculosis. And obviously they had those tuberculosis sanatoriums, but that wasn't until like the early 20th century, which really is a kind of like quarantine. So you send the sick, instead of ours, we just, with COVID, we go to the bedroom and no one comes in and you wear a mask. But that was there, at that time, trying to reduce the spread by getting fresh air, good food, exercise, and things like that. And then also I found an interesting, photo. They did a lot of campaigns for health when this all started happening with tuberculosis. Once it was found out in, what was the date I found? 1882, I think it was. 1882, a guy named Robert discovered it wasn't genetic, supposedly. It was all contagious, and then that's when the U.S. launched all this public safety, which brought me back again to COVID. When we turn on the news, let's hear the public speaking of what's going on, But there was just, and I'll show you this picture, which I'll post on the social media, but it was tuberculosis, and it's a picture of a little baby, and it says, don't kiss me on the bib.
Wow.
Yeah, and the little quote for it was, your kiss of affection, the germ of infection. So, pretty catchy, yeah. I know. That was in 1941, but still, this brings it to RSV, any kind of cold.
Yeah.
People, if you're listening, do not kiss babies.
Especially
I've done a few.
Winter,
I've done a few karate chops to people before. Just get your hands away from my baby. But, so that was with the tuberculosis, and so it was interesting to find out. Though I'm not sure if anyone else of the family of 10 got tuberculosis, but no one else died. They all lived. Okay. All of the kids. What happened with the dad is he got remarried. Mm-hmm. And then in the 1920 census, it was really interesting. He lived with his wife, but like we talked about last episode with all of the neighbors in the census, was his daughter who had married. 2 of his kids, Clara and Nellie, were living with Stella as boarders during 1920. And then again in 1920 was where I saw that they couldn't, Thomas and his new wife couldn't read or write, but he had a job. And then, so everyone else, pretty much most of them got married. They all lived through adulthood. And whoever did the research on Ancestry, kudos to you. There was awesome pictures of, like, the siblings getting together in the later parts of their life. And so they seemed close, and they seemed like they, through this tragedy of sickness, they all stood by each other and were there for each other. So that is pretty much the main part of my story, and I found it really interesting, and many people would have gone through a similar story like this with tuberculosis or other sicknesses in their family. So just a little glimpse of that. And I'm just going to scan through my notes here to see if there's any other important little dates here I noted, but I did afterwards do a Google search of the address. Yeah. And if you're doing searching as well, like keyword searches and newspapers and stuff, it's also really good to put the address if you have one, because they might not talk, specifically the first names, but might mention people living at that address. And I did the Google. It's now like a commercial building site, so no houses exist still, at least on that area. Let's see. And yeah, I think that's all for me.
Sad, but they didn't take the whole house over.
Right.
So that's
a positive.
Really, and the community came together, so that is good.
Right.
To help him.
Yeah, to help him out, and then hopefully from there on out, he, got his job, a good steady job, and made it through. All right, awesome. Excited to hear about yours now.
All right, so my story is very interesting. I did not find one right away for an illness. I did like mysterious sickness. I did pandemic. So I was going down the like Spanish flu, like 1918, and there was a lot of information. A lot of people died from that, and that I really think affected a lot of people's families. Like you lose whole branches of trees.
True.
Yeah, so that was really something that I saw a lot about, but I kept looking for something a little bit different, a little more intriguing, and I came across a story in Massachusetts on Salisbury Beach. So Salisbury is like very north shore, right before you get to New Hampshire. In Massachusetts, it's like right on the border there. So there were some articles in New Hampshire, a lot in Boston, that like New Bedford newspaper.
I've never heard of that, living so close. I've never heard of that area.
Yeah. So this one was the first one I found. It was The Long Death List. Was the name of the article. 2 more victims of poison at Salisbury Beach. No clue yet to the mystery. New cases are being reported, and the doctors are completely puzzled. Landlord Montgomery is today very low. 2 servants now ill also.
Ooh, that's got me captivated.
Yeah, right? I couldn't pass that one up. So this is in Haverhill, Mass. This is where the reporting came from, July 25th. So they initially were poisoned on the 23rd, I think. So midsummer. So think about Mass, going to the beach. It's an actual hotel along the water. I'll show you the picture in a minute. So it says 2 more of the party who dined at the Cable House at Salisbury Beach last Wednesday are dead.
Oh my gosh.
Leroy Smith, a young son of John B. Smith of Haverhill, died in great agony. And Daniel McCarthy, also of Haverhill, an employed hostler at the Cable House stables, breathed his last. So he took care of the horses at the stable at the hotel.
I'm assuming then it's mostly more richer families going here, you reckon?
I'd say
middle class.
Yeah, they had a dinner. So
we'll have more. All right, here we go.
So, concerning the others, the doctors in attendance disagree, but their condition remains about the same. John Montgomery, landlord of the Gable House, is more feverish and delirious, and little Joe Keefe of Amesbury, employed at the house, is also in serious condition. Billy Batchelder of Haverhill, employed at the stables, took a bad turn, and his case is perhaps the most doubtful of any. The other patients of John Wesley Smith of Haverhill, a brother of the other Smith boy who died Friday night, Napoleon Chick,
ooh, I like that,
Frank Penniman of Salisbury, and 2 female servants of the house, whose names will not be given to the press for personal reasons. So that was the first one I found.
And what year was that again?
This is in 1892.
Oh wow!
So it's a while ago. I'll show you the house.
Oh, I honestly love a good picture. Oh wow!
Yeah.
Look at that, the horses.
Yeah, it's right on the beach. There's it was in a line of hotels, and I even found pictures of, there was a carousel there
way.
too. Yeah, so it was a happening place. People in neighboring towns of Amesbury would come there a lot. A lot of people from Haverhill would go there.
Okay.
So it's a pretty hoppin' spot. And So there were lots of speculation. So this was like the story of the summer until another thing happened. I'll get to what took over the news after this.
But they didn't mention in there what caused.
No, because they had no idea.
Okay, so they don't know what's happening. Like, just dying.
This is, and then speculation started.
Oh yeah.
So we just started going crazy. So let's see. We'll read the August 2nd. So the medical examiner took after the train of Haverhill. So the report, they even sent like stomach contents to Harvard to see like what was going on.
In 1892.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
They were looking, and a lot of them thought that there were something to do with the poisoning. And they thought it looked like arsenic. So back in the day, there was this it was a dye that artists actually used, and it was also used as an insecticide, and it was called Paris green. So the articles kept referring to Paris green. I was like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, I never heard of it.
So here's a picture of a can. It actually says like Sherman-Williams made it.
Really? and it says poison right on the front.
It says poison, has the skull and crossbones on it.
Wow.
And it says a highly toxic emerald green powder with a mixture of over 50% arsenic acid combined with lime and copper oxide. So artists would use it to create beautiful, vivid green in their paintings. A lot of them got sick from using it. And then also they used it it was a great insecticide. Farmers were using it on their crops to kill bugs because it would rot out their insides and poison all the bugs. But, slowly poisoning the population as well, probably. So there's that.
Okay.
And there were a few cases of suicides from Paris green in this time period, too. But I had never heard of
I've never heard
Paris
that.
green in my life. So the detectives were brought in because now it's a murder case. Because not only those two people, not just Leroy Smith and Daniel McCarthy, but I have a 73-year-old woman from Haverhill, Mrs. Daniel Webster, also passed away. Mrs. Sanborn was 43. She passed away. As well as Mrs. George Wilson from Georgetown. She was actually on a carriage on her way back to Georgetown, and she started getting really sick.
After being there.
After the dinner. And so
my mind is just like, where did they use this powder? I'm so curious.
We're gonna get there, okay? So
I'm so curious.
They told you what they served. They served fish. So they originally thought, the fish was bad. And then they said, no, it wasn't the fish. It was something, they served steamed green beans.
Oh no.
So they were like thinking some disgruntled somebody decided they were going to put the Paris green hidden on the green beans and no one would notice. And intentionally, yeah. So they talked to, after John Montgomery made a recovery from being poisoned as well, the landlord. So those detectives were asking him, did you have poison in the house? And he was like, there's only one outdoor shed that had some insecticide, but it wasn't Paris green, or there was and then they were like, oh no, they put it in the pepper. So they would put arsenic in the pepper, and then everybody just put it all over everything.
And then it makes you think, though, what's the motive?
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of people who have motives. It's Clue. Oh
my gosh. Let's rule out this person.
People. So we have 5 dead, and they said that over 20 people actually got sick.
Wow.
So there's all these other names. So like I said, the brother of the Smith boy who died, Leroy Smith was only 15.
Oh.
So I just felt really bad.
That's sad, yeah.
Yep. And then there was a Daniel. Then there's just so many different people, and then there were different doctors taking care, so they all had their own opinions.
Oh gosh.
So we talked about Paris green. Also, they were like, oh, it's the water. And they thought there was cholera in the water. Okay. So they tested the water. That was fine. But then John Montgomery was like, oh, well, we could have cleaned out the water by the time they tested it. So they were like, okay, well, maybe it wasn't the water.
While you're saying all this, I keep thinking this is 1892. It baffles my mind. Okay, I'm in my mid-30s. But still, it baffles my mind that this much technology and science could have been happening back then.
I don't know how accurate the science was, but they were trying.
True, right.
They were trying. They were looking at...
But to have water testing and...
Yeah. They were probably looking at, like, a microscope to see if there was, like, bacteria in the water.
Interesting.
Which, if you're thinking about a well by the ocean, and then there was, like, runoff, they said, from other area hotels. So, it could have definitely been contaminated.
Yeah.
But... no one else was getting sick after the fact.
Did it say, was there, like, a duration of time that this all, like, did all of these people get sick within,
from
like...
that dinner.
From just that one dinner.
Yeah. So it was the evening dinner on that Wednesday in July.
Oh, my gosh.
Where these, like, 50 people were all sick. So it wasn't just like, that's why they're like, it can't be the water, because the people in the morning were drinking the same water as the people in the afternoon.
Okay. All right. My brain is like,
I know,
thinking
right?
Rapid fire.
And then
right
I
now.
just kept searching, and I even was clipping all these other things, and Daniel McCarthy is one of the workers, right? Let's go back a little bit more. So
you found tons of articles on this.
Tons, like 30. Okay. Like 30 different snippets.
And this is the exciting part about us not sharing the stories before now, because you get my initial reaction and I get yours, which is cool.
Okay. So I'm going to read another highlighted part.
Okay.
So there was a disgruntled employee.
Okay. So first suspect, probably.
The cook and her got into a fight. Ooh. And so she was a recommendation from one of the other hotel managers. Okay. So John Montgomery hired her. She showed up, and she was like, she didn't show up till noon on her first day, and then,
fired. If he would have just fired her.
I know. Well,
maybe
she didn't last very long. So, so let's see. She lived in Newburyport near the waterfront, and when the reporter called at the house, she appeared to be very willing to talk on the subject. So, of course, they have to describe her, because that's important, what she looked like, I guess. She is of medium height, dark complexion, and quite attractive in appearance. There we go again, of course. When I came to the cable house, she said, I confess I was inexperienced, and after getting to work, I tried to do the best I could. Sometime later the next day, Mr. Montgomery told me he didn't want me any longer. Naturally, I was a little bit put out about it, but I took my trunk and goods to the hotel next door and stayed there for the rest of the day. I didn't have much to do with the place where the food was cooked or the kitchen, and it was certainly a great surprise for me when I heard of the trouble there. Dr. Hurd of Newburyport visited the beach in the morning with the purpose of learning, if possible, of something new. Landlord Montgomery was found in his private office, sitting beside a warm fire, but still feeling weak. So, Mr. Montgomery said that she was not she was like being a waitress, I believe. So she was not good at her job. Doing it. So he basically canned her first day, and she went to the hotel next door. But she definitely was seen again at the hotel later in the day. Ooh. So there was they thought that she put that in the Paris green, some kind of arsenic in the food. Right. And there was also someone saying, well, Leroy didn't eat the green beans, so it couldn't have been that. And then they were like, well, she could have added it to the tea. And because tea, you see floating things in tea and it's fine, but the arsenic would actually settle to the bottom too.
Like sugar.
So you wouldn't even, it was tasteless, and it would just be hidden in the tea. So that was the other thing. But there was a Daniel McCarthy. Remember I mentioned him, kind of like the horse
stable
handler.
Yeah.
So he was engaged to a woman named Kate Kennedy. And the other workers at the hotel said that they had seen her in the area the day after, clearing out Daniel's trunk. She didn't show up at his funeral, but she was cleaning...
Wait, she didn't show up at her own fiance's...
Well, there's this
was after many rabbit holes.
She faked her own death because she didn't.
She's the suspect.
Okay. Kate Kennedy. I was like, Kate Kennedy. That
Kate Kennedy, you are What was your intention there?
Okay, so let me zoom in on,
that's good.
On this one, right? So there was an insurance policy. Okay.
Of course there was.
A policy found Detective Batchelder has this document. Kate Kennedy, shown to be innocent of theft, why she wanted her letters back. So they were written for her lover's eyes alone. So she didn't show up at his funeral, but the attendants at the hotel saw her pulling stuff out of the trunk and running out, and she burnt the letters that she had sent him.
Oh, she's definitely it.
So, here we go. Foul play at the bottom of the affair. They had carried on through the investigation of her movements. The girl had been seen and talked freely about her relations with McCarthy. She claims that her appearance at the cable house the following day, following his burial, and her inspection of his effects following the abstraction of the quantity of letters was due to no other than the reason that she wished to avoid the publication of her letters filled with enduring terms. One thing she does not explain is that her singular action in sending a letter to the man she loved, a black bordered letter, in which he was informed of her death. Okay, so she put a letter in the mail to him as one of her family members saying she had died, so she didn't have to marry him. But this was after...
But she could get his insurance.
After he put her as his beneficiary in an insurance policy.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, right. So it was actually it was like the insurance company that's still around today.
Oh. Okay.
That was like, they're investigating it. So they had found the insurance policy. She didn't take that. She just took the suspicious letters. So I don't know if she ever got paid, but all the letters of whatever she sent to him were gone. And
what else was in those letters is I want to know.
I know. I wish she didn't burn them, because I would have been reading those for sure.
Huh.
So there's the two. So the French maid who didn't make it, waitress Julia LaPlante.
Okay.
She was not in anything really I could find, because she moved around or was not part of census, anything, anywhere.
Okay.
And then there's Kate Kennedy, who lived in Amesbury, but also got married after the fact, so it was hard for me to like
track fully
with the name, because was it Catherine, was it Kate, was it like, were they both from Ireland? Like he had no other family here. His Daniel McCarthy's family were from Ireland, and they would send him like monthly like an allowance almost. Aww. And he would give it to her.
Oh,
he would
come
give it
on.
to Kate Kennedy.
If you have a Kate Kennedy in your family tree, I need to know more.
Right? Please. What was she up to?
Please. That's so interesting.
That detective didn't find her to be guilty for whatever reason.
Did she go to like, it literally only stayed at like the local level? It didn't go to like a jury or anything?
Well, you want to know why? Because the following 2 weeks, the newspapers, I started noticing like their stories are getting smaller and smaller. I was like, why are we losing interest? And I look over and it's Lizzie Borden.
Dun, dun, dun.
So
that makes so much more sense.
So I think a lot of efforts, a lot of energy started shifting away from the cable house poisoning to Lizzie Borden, because that was the story of that time. So, which,
if you're listening, most people, at least in New England, would know that. Yeah. And if you don't, it's a rather interesting story. They even have the Lizzie Borden house you can go and visit. So that makes total sense. But, okay, so back to Kate.
Yeah.
Or Catherine. Did they end up finding out, like, confidently what poisoned them?
A lot of the doctors said it was arsenic, because
because
of the way that they were delirious and they were vomiting. It was just like they couldn't stop.
Interesting.
And then it was once they were once it got out of their system, the remaining group was.
So we'll never know to this day though how it got in the food.
Right.
Potentially, if that's the strongest.
I did a little digging though on John McCarthy, because I was like, I want to know like what happened to him after.
That's the landlord?
Yeah, the landlord. And I'm looking stuff up, and I was like, did he pass away like relatively soon after that.
Yeah, did the carriage house stay open or?
Yeah, and I found that the cable house actually burnt down in 1899, so only 7 years later.
Okay.
So there was an article on that, and a neighboring hotel caught fire, and it was just like a chain effect. So that happened, and there was said it was like it was valued at like $8,000 or $9,000. So back then that was
it's a lot of money.
Pretty hefty sum to lose. But I'm looking up his death record, and I found it that he passed away February 27th in 1904, apoplexy. So he had passed away. They put like attributed to a fatty heart. I'm like, is that like I don't know. So, but I'm looking at the record, and his father's name is John Tyler Bragdon.
So a different last name.
Why does he have a different last name? And his mother is Julia Pomeroy. I'm like, okay, so he didn't keep either of the names. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I found that he had purchased this cable house in 1885. So
he didn't have it
for very long, no. And it looked like he had worked there before he bought it, or maybe it was like gifted to him from the previous owner. But I found he had married in 1859. So he was older, okay?
Okay.
So he kind of didn't stick around he had 2 sons with this woman, Lydia Ann Wigger Bragdon. Mm-hmm. And he had a son named Charles and another son named Frank. So previous to this, it listed him as like a shoemaker. So he was in like the family business of making new shoes. And I guess these 2 sons kept up with that, and they had like their own business. And you could tell they really did get along as brothers, because they named their own children like names like
after each other.
After each other.
Aww,
so I was
sweet.
like, that's really cute. I have 2 boys, so you know.
Yeah.
I like when the brothers actually get along. That's always
that is nice. that's the goal as a parent, right?
Definitely. And they were in the area, but it was like Marblehead, Mass. Okay. So, and I don't know if he just left her, like what happened there, but he changed his name from Bragdon to Montgomery, and it even says it on like the Find a Grave. Like
really?
There's like changed name. Like I can show you who put it in here.
That's so interesting.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It says John Edward Bragdon Montgomery. He was the son of John Tyler and Julia Ann Pomeroy. John changed his name somewhere between 1880 and 1900. So, like I said, he bought it in 1885, so he changed his name. And then I was looking up, and he was a gambler.
Oh,
so I'm like,
that could be dangerous. Yeah.
And then I'm like, did he have people who were
after him? So
have vendettas against him? So there's like 3 or more possibilities about like what is going on with.
Yeah. I'm sticking with Catherine. Did it in the dining room with the arson in the Brussels sprouts. That's where I'm going.
It was
4 with the motive.
It was a deep dive. Yeah. I was having a great time looking at all the details of this, and just kept.
I mean, honestly,
more.
Sad for those.
Yeah.
Like, why did those other people have to?
Right.
For whatever reason, why did those other people have to not make it?
Yeah.
For her whatever revenge or whatever she was doing against potentially the fiancé.
Yeah. See, I think it was Julia, the disgruntled worker. Like, okay. I think she got into a fight with the cook, and then she wanted to frame the cook for making everyone sick.
That actually sounds pretty plausible.
Yeah, so
if you're listening, we're going to post this story, and we want to hear who you think did it.
Take a poll. Who did the cable house poisoning?
Yes, that's super interesting. And so funny, though, that, like you said, that they dwindled, and then the police had to go do different efforts.
I kept looking. I was like, oh, maybe I'll look for newspaper articles for 1893 and 94. And all they've said was, an arrest will be made soon. And then...
Never happened.
They just, it was just to get people excited and talking about it again.
I wonder how... 2 things really quick. I'm going to write down because I want to look it up. Like, back then, did they have, town documentation when you changed your name? Like, I wonder.
I'm sure they do.
They must have had. I've never come across a document like that, but it'd be kind of cool to see what that looks like. And then I also wonder, like, did the profit of that house, the carriage house, like, did people stop going there after they heard the story? Like, did it affect their business?
Well, it was closed up for a few weeks, and they, like, closed
while they did
the
the
well,
investigation?
and while they were looking up stuff, and John, like, all the workers were sick. He even had a housekeeper named Mrs. Wing, who lived with him for, like, a long time, even after it burned down. I saw her on census with him, so Mrs. Wing might be a little, a little sketchy too. I don't know.
Interesting.
Lots of people involved in this story. So
that's definitely a captivating shadow if these people are in your family, because when you're looking up your own family, and to come for our family tree, when you find an article that's kind of darker, it kind of just captivates you because you want to know more about it, and it's just it's really surprising, especially how they wrote back then in the newspapers. Yep. They really make you kind of imagine of what it was like and paint a picture for you. Yeah. So
it was a really, really good story, and I want to know.
Yeah. I want to know. It's not done yet.
I know. I always find the mysteries.
Exactly.
Makes me think all the time about them. But
awesome. Well, if you are listening and you have a story kind of like this or similar, or you've heard something in your family, write to us. We have shadowsfromthetree@gmail.com, and we also have social media on Facebook, Shadows from the Tree. So we'll post some pictures, some articles to have a look at.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for listening.
All right. Cheers.